When I was in college, I was 17 years old, young and dumb. I was looking for a Christian group to join because it was my comfort zone in a new place. My biology desk mate told me he was a part of a great one and I should join up, so I did. Initially, they asked me to fill out a form that included my name, number, address, religious history, and other general information. There were two main leaders, one about 23 years old named Dan, and the other about 35 named Rick. I didn't get creepy vibes from either, but boy was I wrong. After the first couple group meetups to talk about the Bible and learn, I started getting text messages at about 10 p.m. It was from Dan. They started off benign and just him hoping that I had a good experience so far in the group, and was there anything that he could do to make me more comfortable. Let me just say, I didn't attention seek or flirt in any way to this guy. At 17 years old, I was extremely timid and shy, and I was pretty afraid of any kind of attention. I answered his text generically like, "Thank you. I really enjoyed the topics that we've covered so far. Have a good night." I was living with my grandma at the time, and I showed her all of the texts. After I said goodnight at about 12 a.m. the same night, he started texting me that I was beautiful. I shrugged it off and I just said thanks. He then proceeded to send me message after message that he wanted to meet up with me. He would drive to me right now and he thought I was the most beautiful person he's ever seen. I continued to brush off his messages until they started getting vulgar and sexual. I don't remember the exact messages, but they had me afraid and very uncomfortable. I turned off my phone and I went to sleep right away. The next morning, he messaged me apologizing for his behavior and wanted to know if we could start fresh. I said yes, like a dumb 17-year-old who didn't want to make waves in the new group that I was a part of now. Immediately, he started up again with the vulgar texts and then started telling me that I looked really beautiful that day when I was on campus, but I was nowhere near him, or so I thought. I had enough, and after showing my grandparents all of the text messages, I decided to report him to the group's other leader and my desk mate. I had deleted all of the texts before I reported him because they made me feel ashamed and embarrassed, but the leader believed me anyways. Apparently, this wasn't his first incident. They forced him to write an apology letter to me, and they ended up banning him from the group. So, to that guy who sent me vulgar messages and followed me around campus, please, I hope we never meet again. The story takes place in the fall of 2013. My first semester of college, I had a class with a group project worth of a lot of points. I was partnered with a girl who I'm still friends with today named Emily, and a guy named Nick who was a bit odd. Within the first week of class, he asked me if we could grab lunch after class and discuss our project. I figured it wouldn't hurt to get started early since the project was a quarter of our grade. Once class had ended, I asked Emily if there was anywhere she wanted to go in particular. She was very confused and said Nick never asked her to lunch. Shortly after, Nick approached us and told me that he knew this great restaurant about a block away. Not wanting to be alone, I asked Emily to join, but she had to go to another class. Despite feeling slightly uneasy about the entire situation, I still went to get lunch with him. I figured we could get a rough idea of the project and fill Emily in the next class. Things got kind of weird after that. He didn't talk to me the whole 10-minute walk. He would just kind of smile and stare at me. I quickly became even more uncomfortable now. Once we arrived at this restaurant, he insisted on paying for me. After refusing multiple times, I finally gave in. While we were eating, he stared at me with a really creepy smile, barely breaking eye contact with me. He kept asking me personal questions like where I grew up, where I currently live, how many siblings I have, how old they are, what kind of car I have, etc. I would respond with the least amount of information as possible, trying to get back to the subject of our project. After we finished eating our meal, he got up to go grab dessert. While he was away, I texted my friend to help me out of the situation. He then came back from the dessert buffet and tried to hand feed me a donut. I politely declined because gross, and he got really agitated and kept asking why I didn't want the donut. My friends thankfully called right as that was happening, so I quickly thanked him for lunch and I told him I needed to go help a friend. He told me he was going to stay at the restaurant for a little while longer, and I practically ran out of there. After that day, things got really weird between us. I literally saw Nick everywhere on campus. He would be in the library every time I was there. I would see him in the cafeteria or commons area. I saw him in the halls multiple times throughout the day. I chalked it up to just being a weird coincidence, but still had a weird feeling about him. Things quickly escalated. I started to find him standing outside of my classes while I was in class. I sometimes even found him sitting in my class before it started, before even the teacher was there. I quickly realized that this wasn't just a coincidence, and that there was a good chance he was following me around. The thing is, I attended a community college at the time, so I didn't live on campus for him to easily follow me around like this. I can understand how he could figure out my schedule for Tuesday and Thursday, as we had a class together. The class was at 8:45, and I was still on campus until around 2ish. It's really not that hard to follow me from there. But what I didn't understand was how he knew my schedule for the rest of the week. For the following year, I would always see him around campus, outside of my classes, and occasionally around town as well. I ended up telling my mom his name and a description in case I ever went missing. I started carrying pepper spray and made sure I was aware of my surroundings at all times. After that year, he just vanished one day mid-semester. I never saw him again until about a few weeks ago when I passed him at the hall. We made very awkward eye contact, and I quickly called my mom just in case he tried to approach me to talk to me. He kept walking and I thought everything was okay. That is, until a friend requested me on Facebook last night. Oddly enough, we actually have one mutual friend, my ex-boyfriend. After that though, nothing ever really happened, and let's hope it never does. I'm a male. It was my freshman year of college and around springtime. I enjoyed working out, and after a busy day, it was time to hit the campus gym. Now, to give you a visual of how the campus fitness center is pictured, the main center area has several treadmills, some hamstring sets, and some small televisions. This area also has windows for people outside of the gym area to peer into as well. And to the right of the treadmill area includes the weight and bench press section, and to the left is the entrance to the gym. Anyways, I was doing my nightly routine, and the gym was very empty after I was finished. I decided that it was time to head back to my dorm. Now, this is when things started getting creepy. As I left the gym and was going up the steps, I noticed someone across the campus. He seemed suspicious, and I heard him say from the distance,
"Hey, what's up?"
This was a bearded, rugged-looking male, and he had a hood over his head. I then said what's up back to the man as well. At first, I really didn't think much of it. Maybe he just wanted to be friendly. I began to walk across the grass to my dorm. However, the man then started heading directly to my way, with his eyes completely locked onto mine. I became a bit unnerved and went back into the fitness center rapidly. Now, fortunately for me, there is always a fitness worker near the entrance of the gym who sits at a desk and has people sign in before they work out. At the time, I didn't tell him about what had just happened because I felt like I was possibly being paranoid. What if this guy just wanted to chat with me? However, during the time though, I peered outside the windows of the treadmill area, and I saw shoes pacing back and forth. I started to panic and suspected this was the same guy as before. After this happened, I then decided to stick around and watch some TV in the treadmill area for a good 10 to 15 minutes, just to ensure that the creepy man had given up. It was pretty obvious now that this guy didn't have good intentions. The fitness worker at the desk asked me if everything was okay, when they seemed to notice that I seemed uneasy. I said that someone may be following me, and I'm kinda creeped out. They asked me if I needed them to walk with me back to my dorm, and I said that the guy might be gone now, so I don't think I needed that. However, I was dead wrong. After a good 10 to 15 minutes, it was now time. With a deep breath and butterflies in my stomach, I braced myself and I left the gym very slowly. Stepping outside, it was still humid. What came next, though, totally creeped me out. As I crept up the gym entrance steps in the dark night, there was a rustling in the bushes. I peeked around the corner very slowly, and there was the strange man leering at me with an odd expression, only a few feet away now. I was totally creeped out. Without a second thought, I ran back into the gym with my heart in my throat, and I told the worker that someone was right outside the gym stalking me. Campus security was then called. However, by the time the security got there, the man was long gone and nowhere to be found. Fortunately for me, they walked me back to my dorm, but not before I had to file a report about what happened. Thinking about this situation still totally unnerves me to this day. I really honestly thought that the guy just wanted to be friendly, but clearly he was up to no good. So yeah, that was definitely my creepiest experience while in college. This story took place in 2012. I moved out on my own for the first time about 2 hours away from my parents in order to go to college. Within the first few weeks of being there, a random guy stopped me on campus and asked me out. I'm a very shy and very introverted person. This had never happened to me before. I said yes. We exchanged phone numbers and we went our separate ways. At the time, I didn't have a cell phone. I only had a Skype number, so I made sure to explain that to him. However, he would still call me all day long while I was at school, and it honestly kind of put me off. Several days later, I decided I needed to run some errands. I walked to Walmart, bought what I needed, and started walking back. It started to rain, and I thought, wow, it's just going to be one of those days, huh? About a mile into my walk home, a car slowed down beside me. Well, it was the dude. He asked if I wanted a ride. I was naive, sore, and tired, and I gave in. I got into the car without even thinking of the possible consequences. He made a big deal about how he wasn't from that part of town, and how lucky I was that he ran into me while he happened to be doing errands there. He drove me to my place, and he asked if I wanted to go to lunch and a movie with him after I put up my stuff. I said sure, why not? He really did seem friendly, and I didn't really think much of it at the time. Once I got back in the car, however, things started to get weird. He asked me if I like seafood, and I said no. I really dislike seafood. He then said,
"Well, that doesn't matter. I'm taking you to a nice seafood place. I'm sure they'll have something you can manage to like."
Now, for me, this was red flag number one. Why ask and then dismiss the response? Why say that my opinion doesn't matter? However, I come from a very narcissistic home, so I thought that maybe I was just reading too much into it. He then started asking me questions about my major, my friends, my hobbies, all the normal stuff. Once we got to the restaurant and began to sit down, he gave me the weirdest look and started asking if anything that I said was true. What?
"Are these people you're talking about real? Do they actually exist?"
Yeah, they're real people in my class."
"I don't believe you. These people don't sound real."
I'm a little taken aback by this. I don't know what's not to believe. They were very normal people. It really weirded me out to be outright accused of making up my friends like that. He went on to accuse me of lying about every little detail about my life. Still, little old southern polite me kept a straight face and got through lunch. It was just really bizarre. We went to the movie and he kept trying to touch me the entire time. I was already so put off from the earlier things that I didn't reciprocate. He got really agitated by this and brought it up once we were out in the car, about how he expected me to be more friendly. Yeah, no, I'm not that kind of girl. He takes me home, and I was glad to finally have that date behind me now. I thought it was over. I refused to return his calls and I began avoiding him at school. Everything is done, right? No, of course not. He started showing up to my apartment daily at 8:30 on the dot to bang on my front door for literally 30 minutes straight. I mean, he wouldn't even take a single minute break. If I answered, he would ask if I wanted to go to lunch later in the day with him. I always told him I was busy, but if I didn't answer, he would just keep knocking. At the time, I didn't have a car, and I literally walked everywhere that I went. I started noticing him driving past me several times when I'd walk to places. He kept offering me rides, to which I'd always say no thank you. He also kept calling me every day. This went on for about 2 months. All in all, I'd say I'm pretty lucky that it never really escalated anything beyond this, and that it finally stopped after the 2 months. However, it was really creepy at the time. When I first started college, my university gave me a list of writing classes that were required for the freshmen. I didn't get my first choice, but I was intrigued when I got placed in a writing class based on human and civil rights. It was a great class, and I learned a lot and met Chloe, a girl that I now consider to be my soul sister. My professor didn't seem too odd at first. He kind of had that hippie vibe to him and was very passionate about human and civil rights. He was also head of the political science department at the university. When we first got together, he always boasted about how excited he was to have a class that consisted of all women. I didn't really find it inherently off-putting. I thought it was really cool that he was excited, but my friend and I later analyzed a lot of the weird things that he said, and in a different way. As time went on, I got closer to Chloe. Her and I would get coffee and discuss the reading material frequently, which eventually branched out to us partying and hanging out together as well. She used to joke around that our professor liked us the most because we were the loudmouths in the class, in the sense that we were always the ones talking during the discussions. That, combined with him praising our 100% female class, were not huge red flags for me at the time. The largest event that kind of bothers me now is the trip up to his cabin in the mountains. He had asked us to accompany him as a class to his cabin almost an hour and a half away from the university in the mountains. We thought it was a bit odd, at least some of us. He brought up food and I cooked us a large lunch, and it was actually kind of nice to just have a candid conversation with the girls. And my professor brought his wife, so it didn't seem that weird. However, he remained kind of touchy with us, nothing major, just resting his hands on our shoulders while talking to us or trying to get by us. I ended the semester and left that university after finals. I realized that my university didn't have the program that I wanted, so I transferred my credits and started going to another school. My friend was dismayed, but we still hung out and did our work together, and she even took another class with him. She said that she took him on as an academic advisor and worked more closely with him. Again, no immediate red flags from her. That is, until one day she texted me asking if I heard the news about him. Since I didn't go to that university anymore, I was amazingly unaware. Our professor had been forced to resign, and it was in the local news as the university was getting ripped to shreds for handling the situation so poorly. Apparently there was a convention or event, and the school's political science department went to it. The president was female, and I guess he had asked her to meet him at his hotel room to discuss the next day's itinerary. When she showed up, he apparently was not fully dressed and invited her in to wait while he finished getting dressed for dinner. She hesitantly agreed, and as he dressed, he apparently told her that he loved her in the same way he loved his wife, and he wanted to be with them both because she was his soulmate. I'm not sure if his wife was in on it or what, but the students immediately reported the incident. Unfortunately, the university offered her a sabbatical, basically asking her to leave the university. Apparently there was a hearing with university officials, and the professor didn't even deny his behavior. My friend and I got together, and suddenly all of his private meetings with her and I, inviting a group of girls to his cabin in the mountains, seemed very off-putting. I've always found myself to be a very paranoid person, and as I got older, I tried to shed those thinking habits. But now I wish I'd paid more attention and maybe even be able to intervene and say something before this poor girl was essentially booted out of school, only to help protect its reputation. It's truly messed up. I'm not going to lie. I basically went to college to smoke and go to parties. My full intention was to do just enough just to get by while partying as much as I could. Unfortunately for me, I only applied to a few schools and was only accepted to one, a small college in the mountains of New Hampshire. It was very small, around 3,500 total undergrads, and I went not knowing anyone. On the first day, as I was skipping the ice-breaking games, and other students were giving tours of the campus to their families before leaving, I wandered down a small path behind the cafeteria towards a small stream that I had noticed during the drive-in. I lit a joint and was just meandering around when I noticed another dude a little further down the stream that cut a straightish path through the trees. He was also smoking a joint. I assumed by the way he was holding it. I made my way over to see if I had just made my first college friend, and then I introduced myself. His name was Nate, and he seemed pretty cool, and he was smoking some really nice herbs, so I figured I could get along with him pretty well. He stood at about 5'5" and was a little stubby, but I remember noticing that he had a really weird laugh, like a nervous type, and that whenever he laughed, he'd kind of look off to the side and then glance back at me from his peripheral vision. Yes, I knew it was weird even back then from the first time I met him. Literally the first 30 seconds of introducing myself, but I just thought that maybe he was just socially awkward or had bad teeth. Who knows? I was taught not to be judgmental, and he was otherwise pretty normal. We ended up hanging out fairly frequently, playing video games, drinking, smoking, but other people, especially in my dorm, didn't really seem to take a liking to him. Not that I really felt a strong bond with him. I didn't. It was a very superficial friendship built around drugs and debauchery, but I definitely got the sense that my other friends weren't very comfortable around him. Then something really weird happened that I've managed to successfully forget about until very recently. My heart is pumping out of my chest just typing this. One weekend, my roommate was home for a visit, and Nate's roommate was having his girlfriend over, which basically implied in college terms that Nate was going to be staying with me. It seemed automatic. We got trashed and smoked a ton, got pizza, and played video games. I was pretty out of it, and we were both sitting in desk chairs in my room, passing a bowl back and forth, when he then handed the bowl to me, leaning towards me in his chair, put his hand over my hand, and casually said in a very low and steady voice,
"I'm going to kill you."
Okay, so like I said, we were all sorts of messed up, but still, I was definitely a little freaked out. He'd never really been aggressive before. Even at his most intoxicated, he certainly never said anything like this before. I've never really been good at handling confrontation very well, so all I said was, "Dude, no, don't do that," and sort of laughed it off and tried to just write it off as a drunk stoned idiot playing too much Mortal Kombat. We had a bunk bed set up in the room since it was pretty small, and I was on the top. My roommate was a bigger guy and didn't want to have to climb down to pee in the middle of the night. We had both gone to bed, but my roommate had put up Christmas lights that were always kept on, strung along the ceiling. I should also add that I'm half deaf, so when I sleep, I tend to roll onto my functioning ear to block out sounds or muffle them in the pillow. This also means that I'm a pretty heavy sleeper. Sometime during the night, I woke up, feeling a little nauseous, and slowly opened my eyes. Nate was freaking standing on the edge of his mattress, holding onto the side railings of my top bunk and staring directly at my face as I was sleeping. I was totally creeped out. My eyes got wide as I snapped awake and sat up. "What the heck, dude? What's your problem?" I said, backing up and bumping my head on the wall behind me. Then he turned his head and gave me that freaking look from the corner of his eyes. The very same smile/laugh that freaked me out the first day I met him. He was still holding the railings and standing on the mattress from the lower bunk. His face was lit in weird splashes of color from the Christmas lights. He took one hand from the railing and put his finger to his mouth while smiling and still looking at me sideways, and then whispered, "Shh," before hopping down and leaving the room. Now, it was like 3 a.m. when this happened, and I didn't know where he went. I never told anyone about that, and pretty much did my best to bury it and never think about it ever again. I avoided Nate for the rest of the year, making up excuses whenever he wanted to chill alone, but ended up at the same parties with him a few times. We never talked about that, and he never brought it up. I transferred to another school the following year, not because of Nate, just financial reasons, and I did manage to forget about that weird incident. That was 15 years ago. I'm 33 years old now, and I recently got a call from my old roommate from the school in New Hampshire, who luckily remembered my very repetitive phone number. "Man, do you remember that guy Nate that you used to hang out with in the dorms? Well, about a year ago, he killed his two friends with a hunting knife while on a camping trip. He said he was too messed up to control himself. Apparently, he was mixing his meds with booze and drugs, and they said he just lost it. The thing that really messes with me is wondering if he told them he was going to kill them, and if the last thing they saw was that freaking sideways smile that I saw when I woke up that night. I can't even imagine it. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you have your own personal scary story, be sure to submit that to my subreddit at reddit.com/r/southerncannibal or to my email at southerncannibal@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new stories. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Katrina T, Celeste S, Ellie S, Emily W, Heather B, Howard R, Jazzy G, Jonathan C, Joseph F, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Steph L, Tammy S, Terry H, 2Eki for you, and Victor R. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it more than you know. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always